Thanks for hanging out with us here on NBCLX. I'm Jobeth Devera. There are urgent health care issues facing our country right now. And no, they are not exclusively pandemic specific. They are, however, valuable lessons we've learned and are still largely ignoring from our battle against COVID-19. That's according to former FDA Associate Commissioner Peter Pitts. He says that COVID has reframed these 5 urgencies of 21st century healthcare, and they include the urgency of coordination, the urgency of innovation, of 21st century FDA regulatory policy, the urgency of science, and the urgency of preparation. So what exactly does this all mean? Well, let's go ahead and ask him ourselves. Peter Pitts joins us now to explain. Peter, good to have you back with us. Let's go through these one by one. First off, what do you mean by the urgency of coordination? That's the first one, the urgency of coordination.
Well, what we learned from the COVID-19 experience, and we're still learning, is that when the entire healthcare ecosystem works together, we can accomplish amazing things. That includes the government, it includes academia, the biopharmaceutical industry, nurses, doctors, patients, and patients' families. When we all pull together, we enlist people in clinical trials faster, the FDA can work faster because it has more evidence earlier, and we can get testing kits and therapeutics, drugs and vaccines really at incredible speeds, at warp speed. So in that respect, we all pulled together. The ecosystem made the warp speed option possible. It saved lives. It's getting us inoculated with the vaccine a lot earlier than anybody thought. We so have to recognize that we can take these lessons beyond COVID-19, that when we all work together, we can provide better quality healthcare, increase access, and everybody wins.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what else did the COVID-19 pandemic do in the sense of urgency of innovation and then the 21st century FDA regulatory policy?
Innovation really is the key word here. We didn't begin winning the battle against COVID-19 until we recognized we needed new types of medical technologies. And we did. And we recognized that innovation takes investment. So the government tried to underwrite the risk of innovation because most experiments in medical innovation fail. So we underwrote a lot of the risks, so more players enter into the game and came up with some really fantastic solutions. And I think that there's no better example than all the vaccines that are currently on the market and those that will be on the market in the near future. We completely reinvented vaccine technology. We reinvented the way it works within our biochemistry. We took what would have generally taken 10 years and made it happen in a year. And that the result there is saving lives. And that same type of recognition of the importance of innovation can be spread out across a whole number of diseases. Obviously, we're not going to have amazing 1-year victories across every disease state, but recognizing that we need to advance these through innovation, which requires an ecosystem approach, really, I think, is a key lesson from COVID-19. And from the FDA perspective, the FDA recognized that it couldn't continue doing things the old-fashioned way. Unless the FDA helped companies and academia and doctors understand how to design clinical trials, how new medicines can be used, a more thoughtful and energetic approach to emergency use authorizations, unless that happened, there would be a bottleneck. And a lot of people see regulatory oversight as a bottleneck, but I see it as an important step in the process. It can also be an accelerator. So, solid new FDA approaches to regulatory science actually helped accelerate this whole proposition as an important part of the ecosystem.
And I want to get to the rest of this here because I do want to talk about the vaccines you just mentioned. But all of this is included in your new book, The Value Equation, A Journey Through Innovation Ecosystem in the Time of COVID. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to ask about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine very quickly.
Oh, thanks. Again, the word here is equation. A lot of times when we talk about healthcare, and especially, for example, drug pricing, people always focus on how much does the drug cost? What is the list price? And we can talk about that. But the denominator of this fraction of this equation can't be cost. It has to be value as defined as positive patient outcomes. Now, all of the above the line items, of which cost is one, are very important. But if we go into this conversation recognizing that the goal is to make patients better, quicker and more completely, I think we have a more holistic approach to what's going on, and we recognize what value really means.
Absolutely. So Johnson & Johnson vaccine, before we let you go, Peter, they just applied for the emergency use from the FDA, so we could be seeing it used here in the U.S. very soon. So just very quickly, remind us about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, compare it to Moderna's and vaccines that are currently out.
Well, the real spectacular difference between the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which will have an advisory committee hearing in 3 weeks. Hopefully the FDA will give it an emergency use authorization if the data speaks positively, versus the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, is that it's a single dose. And that's very important because obviously if someone can go and get one dose, walk out, and have their immunity build to the full impact, it's a lot better than having two. Because when you have two injections, you have to get people back to the injection center twice. That's a problem, and immunity takes a longer time to build up. Now, the full immunity profile of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is less than either the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine. It's about 65%. Now, what's important to recognize here is we generally think about, a higher percentage being better, but we're not really dealing with letter grades here. Whether it's 95% efficacy, which is where Pfizer and Moderna are, or 65% for Johnson & Johnson, both of those numbers, the 90s and the 60s, those are both solid A pluses. So it isn't a question of which one is better. They're all efficacious. But the beauty of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, if it's approved through the FDA process for an initial EUA, is that it's a single dose. Very important.
And speaking of single doses real quick, we actually covered the story yesterday. There's a new study coming out of the UK that hasn't been peer reviewed yet, but is suggesting that the difference between the first dose and the second dose, which is actually taken about 4 weeks apart, could be increased to 12 weeks so that more people can get that first dose and more people can get that administered. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that, separating the first two doses for that long?
Well, obviously, the most important goal initially is to get as many people vaccinated with the first injection as possible. So delaying the second dose frees up more vaccine for people to get their initial dose. That's incredibly important, and I entirely support that. It's also been pretty well discussed that delaying the second dose by a few weeks does not decrease the ultimate efficacy of the two-dose regimen. What's important to remember, though, is the longer you delay that second dose, the longer you delay people reaching maximum immunity. But I think right now what's most important is to get more people vaccinated with the first dose. So let's free up those second doses to get that goal accomplished. That's clearly what's happening here in the U.S. I think it's the right move.
All right. And again, let's talk about AstraZeneca. It looks like we have a little bit more time here. What's the likelihood of AstraZeneca coming here to the U.S.?
Well, with the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine, there are some data problems. Their clinical trials had some issues. It has been approved in Europe. I believe it will also be approved initially through an emergency use authorization here in the U.S. But the tremendous value of the AstraZeneca vaccine globally is very important because it looks to be the least expensive of all the vaccines out there. Now, they've got issues, again, with their data and with manufacturing. But I think once they work that all out globally, what's going to be crucial is it's going to increase the supply, which increases access and keeps the cost low. Here in the U.S., it will add to the armamentarium of vaccines that are available. It is safe, it is effective, and the more the better.
All righty. Well, Peter Pitts, we appreciate your time. Very quickly, your new book, The Value Equation, where can people get their hands on it and read more?
Thanks for asking. It's available on Amazon, or they should go to our website, which is cmpi.org for an ebook copy. It's a good read. It's timely. And as the author, I highly recommend it.
Perfect. Peter Pitts, thanks as always.
My pleasure. Thank you.